Right, there we are. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Borough Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee Resources. We are being webcast as I speak. The first thing I'd like to do is to run around the room with introductions, please, if I can. My name is Peter Martin. I'm chairman of the Scrutiny Committee. I represent Godalming Holloway for Waverley. Should we go to you next?
Good evening. My name is Andrew Lawton. I'm the councillor for Farnham Webburn.
Good evening. I'm Andy MacLeod. I'm the councillor for Farnham Moor Park.
Michael Higgins, councillor for Ewhurst and Ellens Green.
Councillor George Murray. I'm from Farnham Bourne. Thank you.
Councillor Barker Lomax from Hazelmere East.
Councillor Jane Austin, and I'm the councillor for Bramley and Wonersh, and I'm leader of the Conservative Council Group. Thank you.
Yep, I'm Candice Key. I'm head of finance at Waverley Borough Council.
Hi, my name's Luke Harvey. I am the Joint Assistant Director for Strategy and Corporate Services. It's my first time this evening at this committee, so looking forward to working with the committee going forward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jenny Sturgis, Policy and Performance Officer.
I am Hugh Wagstaff, the Head of Housing.
Good evening, I'm Annalisa Howson. I'm the Assistant Director for Housing for Waverley and Guildford Councils.
Good evening, members. I'm Chris Harrod and I am the Deputy Democratic Services and Scrutiny Manager for Waverley Borough Council.
Good evening, members. My name is Marta Doroszkiewicz and I am a new representative from the Democratic Services.
Thank you. Are we going to be joined by anybody else online? I'm particularly concerned with property, for instance. Who's going to be doing property?
I don't see anyone at the moment, but I shall ensure that we do have someone for property.
Send a message. Okay, fine. Thank you very much indeed. Let us move on then. Just in terms of the order of the agenda, I am changing it slightly. I'm going to move item 7 up and have it before item 6. So we'll do the review of the financial benchmarking measures first. We'll then go on to the corporate performance report Q3 because that will feed in better than many of the questions which we have in the Q3 performance report are going to be housing related. And I just thought it would flow then better into item 8 and item 9. Which are concerning housing. We will also then do item 11, which is the committee work programme, before we look at property investment, because we'll go into exempt to do that. So it makes no sense to go in and out of exempt unnecessarily. So that is what I intend to do. Right, to go back then to the main agenda, apologies for absence and any substitutes. Marta, what have we got?
Yes, we received apologies from Councillor Peter Nicholson and Councillor Terry Weldon.
Okay, thank you. I think Terry is having eye surgery today or yesterday, so I'm sure we wish him well in his recovery. Item 2, the minutes of the last meeting. Are we happy to approve those as an accurate record of the meeting of the 4th of February 2025?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. I haven't received any in advance. Are there any declarations of interest that any members of the committee wish to make now? Or forever hold your peace? Fine. Okay. I will take that as a no. Questions from members of the public. Have we received any, Martin?
No, we haven't received any question from the public.
Okay. Questions from members. I assume we've received none.
No, as well. No question.
Fine. Thank you very much indeed. Then let us move straight on into what is, in fact, item 7, but we're taking now, which, yes, sorry, George.
If I could have a clarification on something which I'm unsure about. The leader, in quite a lot of meetings, expresses the fact that he doesn't receive any recommendations to the executive from scrutiny committees. not just this one, but audit and risk and the other one. So I'm just wondering if you could clarify how these recommendations to executive are formulated. Are they done by us at the end of each discussion? Are they done by yourself? Are they done by the officer who makes the minutes? I'm just wondering, because we talk a lot about things and there's lots of things discussed and there's lots of recommendations in these meetings, but they don't seem to get formulated and sent as an official recommendation to executive. And the leader consistently says he never receives anything. But we do a lot of work and we do a lot of discussions about these things and recommendations, but somehow they don't officially get formulated to the executive. So I'm just wondering if you could just clarify what the procedure is for this committee and how they get to the executive. Thank you.
Yes, many of the discussions that we have, we merely note at the end. We say the recommendation is that the committee notes the report and asks the executive to take note of the comments that were made. And then, of course, there is no record of the comments that were made, so it goes down as no recommendations as far as the executive are concerned. I think also it's very difficult when you have a committee which is, what we have is an opposition which is 11 members, and we have an administration which consists of 39 members, and the Overview and Scrutiny Committees are balanced in the same way. So you tend to expect from an Overview and Scrutiny Committee a recommendation which may be a little critical, which says that they're unhappy with X, Y, and Z. For the most part, whenever, for instance, I have led from the chair with a recommendation criticising the administration, it's always been overturned. In fact, it's never been carried. So in my experience, it's very difficult to get a motion of a recommendation which is critical. And that's up to then members of the parties which are represented in the executive to say, well, they want to be critical. And certainly in the past, when, for instance, the Conservatives had 56 out of 57 seats in Waverley, the only scrutiny came from members of the, and at that time, Conservative members were very critical of the Conservative administration. So it can be done. But I think there's a reluctance in the Overview and Scrutiny Committees to do just that. And of course, there's not much point in just passing recommendations saying, gosh, we think the executive are doing a fantastic job. So in terms of recommendations, recommendations can come from the floor or they can come from me in the chair or from Andrew. So it's up to the committee to decide what it wants to do. And if it wants to be critical and everybody supports that criticism, that's fine. If it wants to send a note of accreditation to say, we think you're doing a fine job, that can be done as well. So it's very much up to the members of the committee at the end of the day.
Thank you, Chair. That clarifies it. Okay, thanks very much. I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I think it's a very moot point, and I think it's something which we should take account of and see if we can't do something about it. Yeah.
It just seems that by the leader criticising that we don't give recommendations, it seems like we're not scrutinising it properly, or we're not doing the function of these committees are not working effectively. And I don't think that's the case. I think people who are in the ones I've been in audit and risk and in this one, people actually do take it seriously. They ask lots of questions. They're a friend. The idea is that it's a friendly critique, I believe, of it, and it has an effective voice. So I think if there are questions for the executive, I think they would appreciate it. I know that he's not just saying it for the sake of it. He's saying because, well, you know, you need to send me something so I can see what you've been doing. So that's the only thing I would say.
And is he itching to come in as a former member of the executive?
I just wanted to add to your own comments, Chairman, that I was actually a member of the council, not when there was 56 out of 57 Conservatives, but when there was about 50 and there was about 6 or so opposition members. And I chaired one of the Overview and Scrutiny committees then. And we did actually produce quite a few recommendations to the executive from memory, including a report on health inequalities, which was a whole report about, which was adopted into the council's procedures and policies. So it can be done. It can be done.
No, I agree with that. And I think we need to. I think we need to sharpen up our act. I think part of the issue is that when the chairman of the scrutiny committee, your microphone's on, Andy.
Sorry.
When I look forward in the plan, and the leader made a few comments about the grounds maintenance contract. When you look forward in the executive plan, there's often only one line. It just says it says X or Y or Z. So when you're on the scrutiny committee, actually, unless you've got the wisdom of Zeus, you really don't know whether this one-liner is going to be something of substance, which you need to look at, or something which is trivial. As an example, there is, well, I better not say because I think it's confidential, but there are one or two things which are actually quite difficult to decide whether you need to bring it to the committee or not. And in the case of the grounds maintenance contract, I didn't see that until after the executive had approved it. You then get 5 days in which you can call it in. Then do you want to call it in? And I'd already missed the boat in terms of my ability to call in because I hadn't seen it. Now, maybe I should have been more on the ball and attended the executive meeting at all times, every meeting, in order to say that it isn't the case. But there was a difficulty there. We're going to have a couple more comments, and I think we'll close on this. Otherwise, we could go on for the whole meeting. I've got Jane and then Michael.
Yeah, it's just a question on that. Would it, in that case, like the executive, can they say, I think this should be scrutinised?
Yes, they can, and sometimes they do. But one thing that I want to see is, I think in the forward, and I've made a suggestion today to officers that the forward plan should have a little description against each item. So instead of just being a one-liner of X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z is A, B, C, D, and E, so that at least you can have an idea that it's something which is worthy, which ought to come to scrutiny committee rather than it being something fairly straightforward. Yeah. Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Just follow on Councillor Austin. The overview and scrutiny procedure rules does say, makes reference to council and executive can pass things to overview and scrutiny. And it also makes it quite clear that overview and scrutiny should be part of the decision making prior to the executive making decisions. Now, Chair, you mentioned, I may have missed it, but in terms of timelines, the actual papers, when members would have had first glance of this, would have been noticed prior to the exec meeting. So just double check.
5 days prior to the March meeting in which they decided it, or February meeting, was it?
7th of March was when it was circulated, the supplementary reports. The meeting was on the 11th of March. There's no chance this committee could have called it in during that period. The decision is then subsequently made. I mentioned it last night. I do think this should have gone through the overview and scrutiny committee, and maybe that is one of our recommendations, that we say if there's major material changes, that the executive, out of courtesy to the committee, I mean, they're not obliged obviously, but should be passing these decisions to overview and scrutiny prior to council meetings.
Well, thank you for that. I think we'll call that to a halt, although we could spend a lot of time doing this. But I think it's a very moot point, and we do need to think about it more seriously. So thank you for raising that. Okay, let us move on then to item 7, which we're effectively having as item 6. Candice, would you like to introduce your report?
Yes, thank you. So this is Q3 financial monitoring. I think the title is perhaps a little bit odd on the agenda, but it is Q3 financial monitoring. It's nothing to do with benchmarking. Within the report, we give you details of what we're looking like in terms of Q3. So as a reminder, this is not the performance of Q3. This is a cumulative performance of what it looks like it's going to be at the end of the year currently. So we've got some key variances within there. Not much of a change really from Q2 to highlight. I think income continues to be a pressure area that we are aware of, particularly in areas such as building control, WTS and planning fee income, all of which have been raised in terms of budget setting for 25-26. Treasury management is probably yet again saving the day. I think we're making nearly £1 million additional treasury management income for 24-25, and that is due to interest rates remaining high, but also really good work from the treasury management team. Instead of they've managed to secure some really good forward deals, long-term deals that are really showing some good returns for us. In terms of the HRA, they're up on their income. dwelling rent. That doesn't mean we're charging people more money. That is as a result of our original assumptions. We assumed about 20 right to buy sales last year, which would have impacted this year's rent income. And it was actually around 8. So that's what that's the result of. Within the report and within the annexes, there's a lot further detail from assistant directors in terms of specifics of variations, so I won't go through them all. We also include in here an update on reserves as well as an update on the debt position. So I'm not proposing to say any more than that, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just first of all say how much I appreciate the new reporting system? This is so much better than anything that we've had in the past. And it is, as far as I'm concerned, is far clearer, where we can see the budget, we can see the expected outturn at the end of the year, we can see the expected variance, and then we have a series of papers which describe what are the issues and what are the things that are going right. So as a style of giving us the financial performance of the Borough Council, this is the best I've ever seen. So I would start with that. So could I thank you, Candice, and thank the finance team for that most sincerely, because it's I think it's a very easy to read and easy to understand document, at least as far as I'm concerned. And I've had such difficulty in the past. So let me just throw it open to questions. Any members of the committee want to make an observation or ask a question?
Thank you, Candice. Very easy to read report, spells it out. And also I like where the heads of services have all put their comments on it, so explaining why they're up or down, whichever what they think it is. It's really, really good. I have a couple of questions though. Customer services and comms is scheduled to be under by 161,000. I know that's just staffing levels, I imagine, and recruitment. But when we have such a problem with customer service and communications in the complaints and the tenant satisfaction, really we should be spending that money and recruit. That's what I think. I don't think we should get to the end of the year have really tricky customer service scores, and we still end up with 106, not spent 161,000. So my advice to Peter, is to recruit these people and spend it, and let's use that would be great. The other thing is that honestly, this brings me on to also about in housing and environment and the HRA capital spend. They're all part of the thing on page 79, and this is savings of £1.6 million. Yeah, that's right. And then the HRA capital spend is going to be less 1.4 million. So that's nearly £3 million, which we need to spend on to improve the tenants' outcomes, right? This is what it's all about. And it's in the housing, you've got the money, you've budgeted the money, and we're going to get to it. I know we'll talk about housing and the tenant satisfaction, and we'll talk about Ian Williams, and we'll talk about the contracts, and we'll talk, as we have done in lots of these meetings. But when you see that it's still not being spent, it seems a shame, because this is the money there which you've allocated to this, and we're just not spending it for whatever reason. And there's probably got lots of reasons why we're not spending it. And I'm sure everyone will say we've got enough money, but this is money sitting there waiting to be spent, and we're scheduling that we're not going to spend it. Yeah? Thank you.
Candice?
So on the first one, the customer and communications, that's predominantly IT staffing. And since Q3 and since this, but they've managed to recruit to a lot of those posts actually. So we are going to see that improving. Absolutely agree on the housing. It's not always a good news story when you see savings, and it certainly here is probably a reflection of resourcing. Without that resource, the team have not been able to deliver some key projects like updating the IT system and various capital projects. Hugh might be able to say more. I know they're working on recruitment, but I think that's one of the biggest issues within housing.
Hugh?
Yeah, just to repeat what Candice is saying, I mean, recruitment within housing is one of the biggest challenges, and if we can't get the people in there, we can't spend the capital money. And the big project that's been mentioned is the IT project. So we've got this nearly £1 million there to deliver a new IT project, and we have not been able to recruit someone to actually lead on that project. So that's what the big thing we need to do in the next quarter. So there are some other positive things within that within the non-spend, but generally I think that's our critical area is recruitment, getting people in, and as I say, the IT project. And you're so right. If we can get that, that will improve the outcomes for tenants and customers.
Jane.
Thank you. We covered it in the budget, Waverley Training Services. I just want to understand what's happening here. At the last meeting, we agreed that this was maybe something we should look at in more detail. The current forecast here, so what the current cost of the service is 450k to us last year, and it's forecast to be 550k this year. So I know it's gone before Audit and Risk on Monday to speak about the governance, but can we make a recommendation that we deal with it here formally? How does that happen?
I've had discussions on this. It is actually a services responsibility, not a resources responsibility. My recommendation is that it goes to services and that there should be an invitation to members of this committee to attend and make the financial observations as appropriate. Because the losses are actually 451,000 this year and 556 in next year's budget. So it's in terms of where we're going. But that's the recommendation. I mean, I would like it to come to this committee, but it's actually not the remit of this committee, despite the fact that it's the financial loss that we're all concerned about. So that's the way I would propose it.
Do we need to vote on that now then, or how does it work?
I'm happy to put that in as a recommendation. That this committee would recommend that Waverley Training Services comes to the Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and that members of the Resources Committee be invited to attend and make their observations. I think we would note with concern the level of loss in the. I know we talked about this at the full council meeting, but losses of 500,000 a year, the equivalent of nearly 5% of council tax, is an enormous sum of money. And I know that there are action plans that are being developed, but I think those need to be brought with some urgency to the scrutiny committee. So would be happy to have that as a resolution. So can we, have you got the wording of that, we say to the executive that the committee notes its concern over the Waverley Training Services losses and request that the action plan be brought to the Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and that members of this committee be invited to make their observations at that committee.
Yes, I will include this. Thank you.
Are we all agreed on that? Yes.
So I'm a member of the Audit and Risk Committee, and we did discuss it on Monday. It was mainly about governance and how it's managed effectively. And we were reassured as a committee that the governance is in place and effective at the Audit and Risk Committee. So it's not a governance issue.
I think it's actually another example of this sort of thing ought to have been picked up 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, that's a failure of the scrutiny committee system, maybe, that hasn't been picked up, or the failure that and nobody's asked to come to the committee in order for it to be addressed. So.
But the main issue was they lost their funding from, I think it was the Education Authority, or whether it was Surrey. Something changed dramatically from from that element of it. Is that correct? Yeah.
Jenny, do you know more?
Yeah, so Candice might be able to clarify. It's not that they lost their funding. What Waverley Training Services did do is they, sorry, the words just escaped me.
So they changed their delivery model.
Yeah, they've changed their delivery model. So they did have other companies delivering services to students on their behalf. So sort of like a subcontracting arrangement, and they ended that arrangement and they delivering everything themselves now. They were also impacted by COVID. And I think that's the reason that they've needed to restructure how they deliver their service, and they've come up with a new business plan, which is in the process I think it's imminently going through the executive and then it'll come to scrutiny for you to see that business plan.
We've made our recommendation. I think it's probably the single most important item in the general fund, as far as I'm concerned, and it's certainly something which is a great worry. Okay, Michael.
Thank you, Chair. It was in relation to garden waste income. There appears to have been a migration to a new payment collection system. Something's gone wrong there, and it looks like it's costing us 144,000. I wasn't 100% clear as to what's gone wrong there and whether that's recoverable. I was wondering if there's some further explanation in respect to that.
Please.
Yes, and so to be completely open, it's something we need to investigate. So we're kind of at the beginning stages of recognising that there's a problem, and officers are currently actively investigating that with our contractor, but also internally to see if there's something we've missed. Certainly not going to be recoverable in terms of residents because they didn't sign back up. So if they have in turn had their waste collected, that's our fault and not theirs. But it's something we'll work with the contractor on to understand how that's been missed by quite such a large degree. But there'll be an investigation. The investigation report will be taken to exec briefing as soon as we have it, and then it's absolutely an item you could ask to come back to ONS if you'd like. Yeah.
George.
I might have to declare an interest here because my waste green bin wasn't collected. So I rang up my wife rang up the council and said, "Oh, you know, my bin's not been collected." Because she said, "Well, let's have a look." "Oh, you haven't paid for 3 years." So when it's been collected, this is the first time. So actually, to be fair, I had 3 years of free waste collection. Now I'm paying it. So, but yeah, that happened to me.
Okay, if we want another recommendation, do you want to note that the committee was concerned regarding the garden waste shortfall and request the administration to investigate and resolve and bring back to this committee? Is that another recommendation we'd be happy to make?
Agreed.
We all agreed on that? Okay, done. Any other questions from the floor? Ladies and gentlemen, any other questions? Jane?
I'm just looking at this end of year, this HRA savings. Do we want to make any kind of noting of that or recommendation about the, spending the money?
Yes.
If I can just say, as an old chief financial officer for many divisions of the company that I worked for 33 years, I have never, ever known a capital spend in a year to be spent. In all the years that I was a CFO, I never once saw an overspend of capital because you put it aside and you never, ever get all the projects all in a row. It's like, you never get all the ducks in a row and you never shoot them down in order. It just never happens. So I think we can express some concern. Actually, I had a big one question on looking at page 87, which is Annex 3, which is the HRA reserves. There's an enormous figure of 15 million, which is the new development impact reserve. What's that? And why are we so behind in terms of spending the money to get the houses built? Candice, do you want to just give us an answer on that? And could you say whether it's worthwhile formulating a sort of recommendation along these lines, or is that just really a waste of time?
I mean, yeah, it's a difficult one to recommend that they get on with it. I mean, I think certainly that I think if it's something that you need to know and that you'll continue to monitor, I would say, and that you would expect perhaps that the head of finance maybe could give an update, because we know that this is led by resourcing issue. Perhaps the head of finance could give an update at the next overview and scrutiny committee in terms of resourcing and delivering that capital plan would be my advice.
Hugh, do you want to make a comment on this, because this is your area, isn't it?
I mean, I think for the point that Councillor Murray said, this has been allocated to officers to spend, and I think we need to be accountable if we don't spend it. And when we come to a later paper about the regulator, etc., and the inspection, I think it is important that we actually are accountable for that. And so I do support the idea that we should, even if it's through the budget report, give more details of why we haven't spent the capital budget. It may be simple things around resources, but at least the committee has asked that, and we are accountable for that. So I think that's why it's important.
Well, can I formulate a little recommendation? We're going to have lots of recommendations today. The committee notes a concern regarding the underspend of capital for housing, and would request a deeper analysis and to hear of any action plan to ensure that in the forthcoming year, the capital allocated is indeed spent. Would that be a reasonable recommendation? Zoe?
Yeah, can I just check, why are we desperate to spend money? I mean, what I observe in the council is spending other people's money like it's going out of fashion. And isn't it a good thing that for once we're not spending?
This is money which it comes from housing rents collected. A portion of that comes and it becomes capital. It's government money to help. It's Section 106 or the equivalent of whatever it is now. So it's not actually part of the general fund. It's not coming from council taxpayers, but it is part of funds which the council have put aside to build houses. So if they put the money aside, and the money is there to spend on building houses, we desperately need more houses. Why isn't that money being spent to build houses? That's the question.
Is it not just building houses, but repairing houses, fixing houses?
It's capital maintenance
spending
as well,
on
yes.
maintenance and
Yeah.
repairs and what needed to be done. So that's why I think hence you'd need to spend the money. Hence we're looking at complaints.
So if we go to the business of building a plan and we say we're going to spend X tens of millions on Y, then why at the end of the day isn't that done? I mean, is it resource? Is it lack of willpower? I think it's a reasonable thing to ask. So have we got that, Marta?
Yes.
Are we all agreed on that? Okay, thank you. Right. Questions? From the chair in that case. First thing that I wanted to say is that my observation is that we've got an additional £1 million of investment income by our Treasury group, and I think they are to be commended on yet another sterling performance. I mean, this has happened now year after year, ever since the interest rates went up, really. And to be getting £6 million of income is phenomenal, frankly. And it's money which could be spent, I think, isn't it? It's not like capital, which is difficult to spend and you can't put it into the general fund. My concern is, however, that in this year, which we're just coming to an end, we've got an outturn which is 400,000 positive, but without that investment overrun or investment income overrun of over £1 million, instead of being 428,000 to the good, we would have been nearly £600,000 to the bad. And that, in my view, is not sustainable. The same thing happened last year. And I think it would be, I just think that from this committee to the executive, it might be worth saying that we note with concern that the year after year, we seem to be bailing out an overspend by the Borough Council and by the fortuitous return from our Treasury group in terms of delivering investment income. We note that with concern. Candice, what would you say in relation to that?
I mean, I would absolutely agree. I think we do have a good picture, and that is really down to Treasury. I think these risks have been raised and some of them have been addressed and mitigated in the budget, but it's absolutely a fair point to say that we can't become complacent looking at the bottom line thinking this is a good news. There are absolutely some risks that really need to be recognised within that monitoring.
I can understand if I were a CFO, I would be building in a buffer, and I would know that the buffer is the Treasury performance. But that is a serious point. I mean, the plan is the plan. We would have been £600,000 in the red were it not for that. So is it a reasonable thing to note our concern to the executive? If we put another little recommendation, we note with concern that without the superb performance by the Treasury Management Group, in their generating £1 million, we would have been £600,000 below loss. I don't know what the correct what's the correct term.
Overspent.
Overspent. We would have been 600,000 overspent. We note that with concern. This is the third consecutive year, I think, that that's happened. And this is not really sustainable going forward. And we would appreciate attention to that. Are we all happy with that one? Or does anyone want to add to that? Okay. Jane?
I'd just like to turn to our £1 million last night spending of our capital receipts. We didn't have the opportunity to scrutinise the contract last night pre full council. It was mentioned that we could do post scrutiny review of it, and I'd like to propose that that happens, that we do that.
Happy for that? It's a question again of whether it comes to us or whether it goes to services. Again, it's a financial concern, but it's a services item, and it's a services item which goes to the services committee. But could I put a recommendation then that the ground maintenance contracts come to the relevant overview and scrutiny committee for retrospective scrutiny? That's a recommendation of this committee. We would be happy with that.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. So it's a further item. Thank you. If I can then continue, I note with some interest that the car parking income is looking pretty good. The budget, we've exceeded that by not a huge amount. The budget was 5.9 and we've got to nearly 6.1, but that was pretty good. The concern, I think, which leaps out from these pages to me is the planning department. And if you look at the planning department, we are substantially underwater. The overspend in that department is very large indeed. The forecast variance is £612,000 on an approved budget of under 4 million. And now planning again is not the remit of this committee, but again, we're looking at financial performance. And we note with alarm that the planning department continues to perform very badly financially. Candice, do you want to give us any reply?
Yes, so there have been a number of issues, I think, within planning this year. So firstly, we've been reporting all year that income is down, and we have addressed that in budget. What we've also had this year is over £200,000 in supplementary estimates for agency spend and over £200,000 in appeal spend. So those are kind of the three areas that you really, every year, are probably a concern with planning: income, agency spend and appeal spend. Appeals is difficult for the team to control. Obviously, it depends on the decisions that are made and whether somebody appeals that decision. That's a difficult one. Agency, certainly, I know that the assistant director is looking at an active recruitment plan to try and bring that down. But I think it's absolutely an area that needs to be recognised as a risk, and work does need to be done to bring down that deficit overall.
Again, for as long as I've been a member of this this council, which is now 20 years or so, the planning department has always struggled. Right from that, I can't ever remember anybody feeling that the planning department was running smoothly and contributing. It is the biggest relevant to the size of the budget. It is a huge difference, and I just think it might be worth noting our concern. George?
Yeah, sorry. So I was at the Audit and Risk, and Claire Upton Brown was there, and we mentioned it as well because it became it's part of the Audit and Risk. It was a risky it came up, and one of the good things about the new MPPF is that we can now set our local fees and charges for planning. When that happens, we're not too sure, but she thinks it's going to be imminent. I think by the summer, I think she said. So we can now, instead of having a national set of things, the government came in that. So it's one of the good things which came out of the MPPF. So I think that will be a positive step forward for the future.
Let's go to Andy, and then I'll come to Andy.
Thanks, Chairman. Planning is a big problem nationally, in fact. I just wonder, are we able to say, is our planning department doing better or worse than planning departments nationally? Do we have any benchmark type figure on planning departments?
Some of the figures I've seen show that we're about the fourth worst in the country, but Candice, you might want to make a point.
Yeah, so we recently did get some benchmarking review done where we looked at different unit costs of what we deliver as a council against our nearest neighbours and wider, and we do land quite high on planning, I would say. So yes, we're certainly
High meaning not good.
not good. Yeah, so our costs are high compared to our nearest neighbours and probably many across the country. So it's something to look at. I think definitely it is a higher unit rate.
Come back on that, that's useful to know that, but is this anything to do with the fact that Waverley's got the highest ratio of house prices to income in the whole country apart from Greater London? I think that's the sort of thing that puts this council and our planning department under particular pressure.
I think that recruitment to all local government offices where people have to live in the patch is going to be difficult, which is perhaps why so many of our officers don't live in the patch, and many commute heroic distances or work a great deal from home. But the reality is that this has been an ongoing situation for as long as I can remember, and it's time we fixed it. It'll be an interesting business when, for those of you who become unitary authority councillors, and I won't be, you'll be struggling with social services, because exactly the same problem exists when social services recruiting for social services, whether it's adults or children's, is immensely difficult, especially being on the edge of London. And it's an identical picture in terms of trying to get the identical thing. I've got Andrew next, then I'll come to you, George.
Thank you, Chairman. My question's just about budgets. If as you said, ever since you've known planning, it's always missed its budget targets. Why are we constantly being over optimistic and setting a budget which is never going to be achieved?
Candice, do you want to comment?
Yes. I mean, so I think we do recognise when we're not performing well. So next year, for example, we have reassessed and moved down that income target by quite some degree. It's a moving target. I think planning is led by markets and it's constantly changing. And I would say the costs have continued to go up. The income, perhaps over the past few years, has continued to go down. I don't think we would ever hope or expect for planning to continue to go down. That's not what we thought we'd see. So I think we're quite accurate as we can be with budget setting. We try to recognise trends in prior years, but planning has been quite volatile. There have been a lot of changes, and it's very hard to predict. Yeah.
George, finally.
Thank you. So Candice, did you say that appeals? Is it not just the cost of administering the appeals, but the findings of the appeal, and they fine Waverley? Does that come out of the planning department's budget, of this budget we're talking about? And maybe that's the reason why, because because we live in a really expensive area, every house is, £1 million. That is why the appeals are a lot more expensive here than they would be in Burnley or somewhere, right? Is that right?
Yeah, so that is planning appeals are in this budget. So 240,000 supplementary, but that's on top of a budget of around 300,000 anyway. So it's a very high appeal spend. I think perhaps it's probably some feedback I could have so within this monitoring, I can report to you the number of appeals, because that's often led by obviously decisions, and the decisions are then appealed. So that's something we can look at in terms of what's causing the high number of appeals and the high value appeals that we do have. That is something that I think in our control slightly more.
Again, planning actually is not a remit of this committee. That's a services committee, but I think it's probably reasonable that we should note the poor performance of the planning department and express concern that during the course of the next year, we don't see a repeat of the performance we've seen this year and in prior years. That would be a recommendation perhaps we could put forward. Jane?
Yeah, just on that, obviously with the housing supply now down at 1.28 years, we can expect more things to go to appeal, and we can expect to lose more things on appeal. And I suppose the question we could maybe incorporate in that is to have an understanding of realistic target or a realistic expectation of proportion of appeals that will be lost given the change in the market.
Candice?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's something we do need to look at and have a wider look at our appeals and whether our reserves for those appeals are sufficient. I agree.
Okay, so can I suggest we put a recommendation in? Julie?
Just given that we are going to be able to charge differing amounts for planning applications and appeals, maybe we should put together a model of how we should change our prices so that we can break even, so to speak. You know, rather. That's exactly what. No, but like
I imagine if they
specifically-
want to put the charges up, they'll have to do some sort of modelling to make sure, and of course they'll then have to provide a decent service. And the decent service
Well, they've got a
requires
monopoly.
the right level and number of employees who are preferably permanent employees rather than agency employees. So it becomes a very circular problem, and sometimes a circular going down into something nasty. Can I recommend then that we note we note with concern the overspend of the planning department this year and in prior years, and recommend that greater scrutiny is provided in the forthcoming year to ensure that problems are understood early and resolved. That is tricky because it needs to go to the other committee. What Chris, can you advise on this, or where do we go?
I think perhaps what we can do is we can perhaps look at some of the recommendations that have been made this evening so far, and indeed any that may come forward for additional items. And if we could perhaps get together and establish what recommendations need to go where, any that need to go to different scrutiny committee, or to the other scrutiny committee, I should say. I think perhaps we could just deal with by whatever email on behalf of yourself, Chair, if you're content with that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a recommendation to go elsewhere rather than to the executive. Would members be happy to leave that with me in terms of what we do there? But I think we need to note our concern financially, even though it's not our concern directly. Okay, fine, let's use them that way. Thank you. Just moving on. Another problem or another issue I have is with the general fund reserves analysis in Annex 3. I think it's towards the end. And my concern is with the overall. I'm really looking at page 85, and we don't have a summation. Candice, in this page of all the usable reserves and the contributions and the commitments. But when I added them up, the budget contribution amounts in the second column came to 2.8 million in the usable reserves, and in the commitments it was 8.6 million. So there was a 5.8 million decline in the level of reserves. And I was really expressing some concern as to, well, whether we should be concerned at so large a decrease, and are we, where is the level at which we would be concerned about the working balances and the usable reserves level?
So our minimum working balances should be £3.2 million. That's what's been assessed, and that's what the Section 151 officers assessed as well. So the fact that we're seeing these numbers decrease quite a lot is not a bad thing. I think government have been very critical for local, and rightly so, being very critical for local governments for sort of holding on to high reserve levels, whilst at the same time needing to up their council tax, etc. So I think this actually just shows the planned use of a lot of these earmarked reserves is happening. So it's not something I would be concerned about. You're well over that £3.2 million working balance level. And in the Section 25 report that's just gone through budget, these have all been assessed, and we've assessed the level of risks for different areas. These are not all just reserves for risks. Some of these are earmarked reserves to get on with something or to do something. So it's not something I would be concerned about myself, no.
Okay, thank you. And just my last point, I think it's my last point, is the debt level in Annex 4. And thank you, I've not seen so comprehensive a report on debt before, and as an old accounts receivable manager, my first management job in finance, wasn't that exciting. Debt was really important. What I'm concerned about is the level of debt that we've got in the housing area, over 365 days. So if you look down that 365 days column on page 88, we see the two housing numbers are 278.9 £279,000 and £382,000. That's the lion's share of all of the long overdue debt. What is that? And what are we doing to either get it in or write it off if that's what you have to do? Candice?
So looking at these sort of separately, the Housing General Fund one, so the 279,000 is predominantly made up of homelessness debt. So that's quite a sensitive area, and often what you see with those cases. So this is where we're paying rent in advance payments and getting people into private housing in homelessness cases. And often what you see with those is very low repayment plans because of the nature of what we're dealing with. So it might be £10 a week. You're not going to see that debt paid down very quickly. But we are looking to actively review this. So we're looking at reprocuring the debt management contract to look at whether there actually are some cases here that we do need to probably write off. But some of these people are continuing to pay £10. And with those homelessness cases, if they want to get on our housing register, they can't have a debt with Waverley. So that debt, a lot of the times we don't want to write the debt off because if they come back and want to get on the housing register, that debt's gone. So they should be paying down that debt, or at least working with us to pay down the debt. So it's quite a sensitive area, which is why it's quite a high level, is because of the low payment plans that we have there. The other one for housing HRA is predominantly to do with leaseholders. So this is for our flat blocks where we will carry out repairs to the block, such as roofing repairs. We will do the insurance for the building and other admin bits that we do for those blocks. So we've got a high level of leasehold debt. It is too high. Services have recognised that, and they've got two agency resources in currently really trying to hit that age debt and work to clear it down. And they're doing some really positive work. So I would expect to see that come down quite a lot over the next few months, few quarters. So it's something that's been recognised and is being worked on.
Well, I think it's just something which this will come every quarter, won't it now, this level of debt? And thank you for providing that. As I say, it's the first time I've ever seen an analysis of the debt, and it's really important. So I think it's something which we need to keep an eye on. George?
Thank you, Candice. Well, it's really sad to hear, right? Sobering thought, right? And thank you, your explanation on that one. So the leasehold debt, is that service charges? Is that what it is? Yeah, that's what you mean. Yeah? Thank you.
I think that concludes what I want to say. Are there any other comments from any other members of the committee? Any thoughts from others? Candice, any observations? We're all okay? So we've made a number of recommendations, which will be interesting to see. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Gosh, this is very exciting. Right, let us move on to item 6. We're sort of going backwards, and then before we go forwards, which is the Q3 performance report. Jenny, I would just note on this that the officer report curiously came after the main body of the report and should have come before. So that confused me. I was just about to send Marta a little note saying, where's the officer report? And then I looked a little more clearly and found it.
Yes, I apologize for this.
We are, of course, only concerned with pages 40 with only pages 65 to 69 of the report. The other early parts are the responsibility of services. So we looked at pages 40 to 64. But this is the sort of fairly new style performance reporting. So Jenny, do you want to introduce this Q3 performance report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report, as the Chair said, the report presented this evening is the Q3 performance report, which is for the period from October to December 2024. The whole report is from page 13 of your agenda pack, and the corporate priorities which this committee scrutinises are decent and affordable homes and a resilient and well-managed council. So either myself or officers present are happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. If we are unable to answer your questions, we're happy to provide you with a written answer in the coming days. Thank you. Sorry, one other point I wanted to make is we will be in the coming months and over the summer, we will be doing a detailed KPI review, which will obviously come through this committee, and we would welcome any comments or feedbacks on that you have this evening or in the coming months, anything that you would like us to look at.
Thank you very much. Right, members of the committee, any thoughts, observations or questions? Zoe.
So I've got two. I guess if we look at local authorities, average sick days or absent days are 7.8, and our target's lower than that. I just wonder why we're doing that to ourselves, because this looks, you know, red, 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 whereas in fact we are below average for local authority. Oh, sorry,
Which page number?
pardon. So local, so total staff sickness absence, R5.
Page number.
Yep. Yep, 56. So I'm just curious. I mean, you know, it seems to me we're creating a rod for our back there. Curious. And then the other point that I wanted to make is, again, I'm banging this drum again. Have we made any progress at all with regards to housing repairs for getting competition in so that we can improve the service to our tenants?
Let's just deal with sickness first before we come to housing. So Jenny, do you want to mention anything on that?
Yeah, so on this, the sickness target of 6.52, no one has been able to tell me where that target actually came from. And I suspect that however the target was set was pre anyone who's currently working at the council. And obviously, as we're in the middle of the year, it wouldn't be a good time to change that target. So we will be reviewing it as part of our KPI review.
Whilst we're on those pages, before we come to housing, if I may, just looking at page 57 or R6, staff sickness absence by service area, I'm alarmed to see, according to this report, that a very large number of days were lost in the regeneration and economic development area. How can that be? That seems to be a very high figure. If I go on, then also there was a which one?
Page 55.
Yes, that was the one. And if we here we go, page 55. If we go back to page 55, and that's total staff turnover by service area. We have a colossal figure in the Joint Chief Executive and Strategic Directors. It looks as if 90% of the people have resigned. Have I got that? Have I got that right? I don't understand that. Could I make a suggestion here, Jenny, that in addition to having percentages in recommendations or in KPIs like R4, we also need to have the total numbers of staff involved, because if it's 3 out of 4, 75% is enormous, but it's only 3 people. If it's 75 out of 100, well, that's a different story. So the percentages don't give us the whole truth. And I wonder if you could just comment on those points. Thank you.
So in terms of regeneration, the staff sickness, sorry, I'm just trying to see how many employees they've got. So they're quite a small team, so I would suggest that maybe it's related to the fact that they're such a small team. If they had one person sick for 2 weeks, it would really push that figure up. But I can clarify that detail for you. In terms of the resignation turnover, in the Chief Executive and Strategic Directors, we have looked into that, and it's not when any of the directors have left. So what I would suggest is it was probably related to a restructuring of the joint management team. And in fact, it's a good point to highlight, because it suggests that we maybe need to look deeper into that detail. This information is pulled directly out of the HR system as it is. So maybe it's worth highlighting that in future if it's a restructure, which shouldn't be happening as much going forward. But I'm happy to come back to you with a written response on that.
Okay, but could you take note of a recommendation for the future that we do see actual numbers in addition to the percentages, because otherwise we don't get the picture here. Okay, Jane.
I was just looking at the notes, and that would time with the departure of Ian Doyle, Annie Wrighton, and that's what the notes say as well. So it says here, turnover is highest, which reflected a number of running cases being brought to successful resolution and the individuals leaving employment in this period.
I think the numbers would be, in addition to the percentages, would be the key thing. Yeah. Just in that, also in that general area, if we go to R8 on page 59, which is the contractor employee ratio. Again, you do have actual numbers of agency workers and so forth, and the number of employees that we have, which is quite helpful. And I guess if you look at the planning area, or if you look at legal and democratic services, there are 18 agency workers and out of 32 Waverley employees, or if there are 24 Waverley employees and 18, is that right? So where does the ratio is 75%. So does that mean that it's 18 of 24? So are the agency workers included in the number of Waverley employees to get 18 out of 24? Is that right? Or is it a total, in fact, of 24 plus 18, which is 42? Is it actually 18 divided by 42? So in that case, it's not 75%.
It's total.
Well, 18 of 24 is 75%, but it can't be. You can't. So it looks to me as if you want the ratio agency workers to employees. Well, I suppose that says that. Well, that's a little confusing to me. I suppose what that's saying is that for every 4 Waverley employees, there are 3 agency workers. I guess that's what it's trying to say. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
It's the ratio.
It's a slightly strange. It's a slightly strange ratio, but because it sounds as if 75% of our staff are agency workers, which is not the case. Sorry, Luke.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, we can provide a bit of clarity. I think the operative word here is ratio. So what we've got in effect here is of the Waverley staff in total, 75% of them are agency.
Right. The important word is ratio. Sorry. Yes, I have.
So what we can do, we can clarify. Perhaps if the committee's minded, we can either use percentages or we can have like a 1 and then a colon 3 or 4, whatever which way presentation that works.
Yeah, I guess once we get used to it, we now know it. We focus on the word ratio. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And then Jane, I think, had your hand on as well.
I did find this a very helpful report. Obviously, I think we're all keen to reduce the agency staff. The only issue I had with it was that it was up to 30th of June 2024.
So I was going to raise that as well.
And I was just wondering whether it's possible to have something a bit more up to date, maybe the latest quarter, or whether that would be too difficult to do.
So I will ask them, but based on the fact that all the other data is up to December, I would imagine there's a reason. I'll try and see this quarter if they can get it more up to date, but I will come back to you and clarify that.
Frankly, having information 9 months old is not very good.
Oh, hello.
Jane, sorry, I forgot you.
Sorry, it's my request that we put it as a ratio. That makes no sense to me, this graph. I think maybe that, yeah, can we all have it as a ratio going forwards? Thank you.
So
Sorry.
can you
Chairman.
don't like ratio, you want a percentage of what?
No, I want it to be a ratio.
Yeah, as long as we understand it is a ratio, it's not a percentage.
No,
of-
but I'd like it as 1 to X rather than presented in this way as a percentage.
Oh, I see. You prefer to see it as 3 to 4 or something of that sort?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Or we could have both perhaps, so that both, we're all satisfied. Okay. I want to just turn on now, well, I want to come to housing, but there is, before I get to that, because I want to then feed into the next agenda item fairly seamlessly. Could I just go to one other area of housing, which is where we have the number of, I'm looking at D8 on page 47, D9 on page 48, and D10 on page 49. We're just being advised here of the number of homes, or in the case of D8, we're being told that there were four homes granted planning permission in the whole of Q3. I don't know whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, and why we're looking at this. And isn't this isn't homes? These are not social homes. These are not part of our own property. This is all any developer getting approval for affordable homes would come into this category. I don't know how to look at this, and it's confusing to me. Similarly, D9, number of affordable homes started on site. Naught doesn't sound very good, but on page 48, number of homes started in Q3. What level should we expect? Why have we got it as a KPI? It's interesting, but I'm just wondering how we treat it as a KPI and what we do with it. And similarly, the number of affordable homes delivered on page 49, 69 doesn't look too bad in relation to the prior years. But how are we to judge what is a good performance? Jenny, or?
Okay, so these KPIs come from the council's original priority from the corporate strategy about affordable homes. And you're right, there aren't any targets around them, so they are always a little bit of an anomaly. But the view is that you would be able to scrutinise between, we've got the focus on affordable housing, which we need in the borough. You've got the information coming through from planning, and then you can see from that planning how many have started on site, and then how many have started on site, how long does it take for them to be delivered. So I think that's the scrutiny element. And that's from a few years ago, and that's when it was when the housing strategy and enabling team sat within the housing service. They now sit within the planning service. But from the conversations with you, I think that the only targets we will have will be through the local plan. So at the moment, this information is what the team are doing to support developers and registered providers to deliver affordable homes in the borough. And that's why it's that factual information rather than a targeted piece of information.
Any thoughts from the committee? Michael, and then George.
I think that's absolutely right. It's in line with the corporate objectives that were set out in terms of the number of affordable homes the council are looking to commit to. But within the narrative, it sort of breaks down, you know, there's, and this is again helpful, as 69 affordable homes were delivered by other providers. There were 0 affordable homes delivered by the council. I think in terms of clarity, it'll be quite nice to have that maybe year to date as well, just to know where we are with it.
Just to agree with Michael and Annalisa, thank you. I just think it's an information thing we need to know and be aware of, and so we can keep a view on it over a year would be good. You know, comparing it year on year would be that would be important. I think, just because it's an issue and it's a typical issue, and it will be more so with the new MPPF and how we're going to meet those targets. Thank you.
But my question before I come to Andy is, how do you know? I mean, we need more. I mean, if we're to understand this, then we need to understand what the plan is expecting. We need to, I would have thought more interesting would be to know the accumulation of housing approvals given, for instance. I mean, it says that there are 4 in this quarter, but I mean, there may be 600 planning approvals that are extant as we sit now, and none are being built. Yes, it's nice to have information, but it's information that I can't handle because I don't know, is this good, bad, or indifferent in relation to the sort of general targets that we have. Andy, then I'll come to our officers.
I mean, in my opinion, it's terrible, actually. Shows a miserable performance, but it's not this council's fault, Chairman. The council can do very little about it. It shows that the planning system does not produce hardly any affordable homes in a borough like ours, where there's a tremendous demand for affordable housing. So it shows a misery, but it's not a criticism of the council. It's criticism of government policy and the way the planning system works. It shows a dreadful situation.
Well, I think it does, but I need much more than we can see here. I think there's not enough information here for me to form a view. I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you, but 4 sounds appalling, and 0 the month before for planning permissions seems very low. And it's substantially down on what was there in the previous quarter. So my observation is that I find it very difficult to understand whether this is good, bad, or indifferent. And I think we need a lot more information in order to be able to understand it. I don't. In my view, these are not the right KPIs, or at least they're not being presented in the right way. Comments?
Well, as my colleague said, we're in the opportunity to reconsider the KPIs and what you do want to see. So I think it's probably worth having an offline conversation with my planning colleagues as well as the housing strategy enabling managers to see what data we do have, what targets there are, and then we can come back, Jenny, with some new information.
I think context is all here. You know, we almost need a presentation which says that here is the context that we need to look at this in, and more information on the accumulation of extant planning permissions and where we expect to be, what the targets are and what they're going to be. You know, there isn't enough information here for me to form any view at all, and therefore it's meaningless as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that's a bit strident, but I think that would be my. Because so could we have George?
Chairman, at the beginning of this, you said that this ONS is not about planning. So, but now we are, now we're looking at planning in quite some detail and asking for more figures and everything else. But I thought we weren't involved in planning. Sorry.
That is a very interesting observation. Yes. What thoughts on this?
I think that's because that's very new news that the housing strategy enabling managers are moving over to the planning team. They, over the course of the last 10 years, that role has moved from planning to housing, from housing to planning, and it's back and forth a little bit.
So that would mean why it's moving to a different committee, not because it comes under planning, so it would be the services thing. Sorry. I didn't want,
George, you're absolutely right. I think, can we just note our concerns on this? Luke, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, excellent debate. There's some really good comments raised. I think I'd echo the point around context and providing, painting the planning picture in the wider context. The challenges that you see here in Waverley are also replicated across Surrey and indeed the wider country, particularly housing delivery numbers have shown a bit of a decrease in our neck of the woods due to construction skills shortages, but also increasing costs, etc., which are rippling their way through. On the context of planning, we've got colleagues here in Democratic Services who'll be able to advise on the constitutional section here, but planning is a non-executive function from the kind of the policy side of things. So the scrutiny aspect in this context is around our housing objectives in the corporate strategy. Hence why there's no target in effect. So it's important information for the committee to have in discharging that the scrutiny function. But I think it's just useful to clarify that planning policy is non-executive, and that's kind of the remit, and the development management is the remit of the planning committee, which will receive detailed performance information as well. So the reason why it's here is because it's a corporate objective, and then kind of what team that sits in will reflect what priority you pick up here. I hope that adds a little bit of clarity to the discussion.
I think this is work in progress, and I think you'll take note of our comments, will you, Jenny and others, in terms, and Luke, in terms of how we paint the picture for the future. I don't think these KPIs are the right ones, or they're not being presented in a way that I can give any comment as to whether they're good. They look to be poor, but I don't know. Andy?
Thank you, Jamie. I'd just like to add to what I said before. I mean, the government standard method calculation tells us that a need for something like 1,300 or 1,400 houses every year in Waverley. That must mean there's a requirement for hundreds of affordable homes, unless everybody in Waverley can afford to buy market homes, which is clearly not the case. So what I'm saying is that a performance of producing, 10, 20 or so affordable homes in Waverley every year is just hopeless. And
Yes.
I'll repeat again, it's not the council's fault.
No.
Because
I buy that entirely. All I'm saying is we're having a set of KPIs here, which are just information, and I can shrug my shoulders and say, well, it's nice to see, but I don't know how to make use of that information unless I have the context. I need the information that you've just given us to feed into that to say, are these good, bad, or, and then, as you say, what can you do about it other than talk a lot?
we need to break down how that 1,400 should be structured. How many executive homes do we need? How many middle homes do we need? How many affordable homes? And it must be in the hundreds.
Well, yes, and then that's trying to drive the market, isn't it? If you're going to edict on how many executive homes you're going to have, that will be quite an interesting way of going about things. I think let's not get drawn into that for the moment, otherwise we'll be here all night. Let us move on. Jane?
Before we get on to repairs and responsiveness of repairs, I'm relatively new to this committee. I was quite surprised to see D1, page 40. We seem to be really not performing well on reletting voids. Could I have some explanation of why that is consistently underperforming?
Okay, I was going to, just before we came to that, and I will come to that, I just wanted to draw attention of the committee to a little success story, which is on page 52, R1, level 1 complaints by service area. I just wanted to note the fact that the housing services reached their target. They have a 75%, a 100% achievement of the target in terms of responsiveness. And I think that's the first time we've seen that for some time. And I just wanted to say that's good news. There are some improvements. So, but on the other hand, let us come to D1, D2, D3, D4, 5, 6, and 7 in the area. Hugh, do you want to just introduce these measurements before we then discuss them?
Yes, so I'll give some context. So we've got 4,800 homes, 500 leaseholders, and we're responsible legally to make sure that they're well maintained, they're safe for people to live in, and it's actually enjoyable that they live in our homes. In terms of the maintenance and reservicing empty properties when people leave the properties and we have to re-let them, we have one contractor called Ian Williams. They do the majority of the work. So to give the context, they have around 1,000 repairs per month that they have to do. Then they do other minor works like showers, walk-in showers, etc. And then they have to also do void works and help us turn around the voids as quickly as possible. Those voids can be quite small works and can take 5 days. They can be major works where they have to change the kitchens and bathrooms, decorate the whole home because someone's lived there for 30, 40 years. So there's that whole range of service that Ian Williams are expected to deliver. We went through quite a process to actually come up with the contract and that service delivery model, which did at that time include the ONS. So their Ian Williams contract started in 2022. It didn't start off well. And they basically was poor service. So for the last 9-10 months, we've really been working with Ian Williams with an improvement plan and in terms of them improving and ensuring we as contract managers improve and help make them accountable. And so we've had different improvement plans, which we've especially have gone to the Landlord Services Advisory Board. So you've now got Q3 in front of us, but I've got some figures for Q4 that shows there is some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of improvement. But we'll start off with D1 in terms of the voids. So this is not just a measurement of Ian Williams, it's the whole process. People leaving the properties, resurfacing it, and then then we've got to re-let the properties and get people in. So with gradually over the last 2 years, our performance has really gone down. We originally had a target of 20 days and we were usually meeting that. As performance was more difficult, and there are challenges, there are increasing challenges over the years in terms of voids, in terms of there's more health and safety work that we have to do on them, and there's then delays in terms of testing water. So it's a very complex process to actually re-let a home, and if we're trying to do it within 20 days, and then you've got someone, we're trying to sort of make sure they take up the tenancy quickly. So it is a challenge, and we've, as you see from the KPIs, we've clearly failed in the last year. But we've had an improvement plan, we've put extra resources into it, and we've had more management oversight, and we've really seen some improvement in the last couple of months. So in February, the properties that were let, the average letting time was down to 37 days. The mode average, i.e. the majority of properties were let in around under 30 days. There was couple of outliners, which should have happened. But I think there's the core, we are seem to get in that core improvement there. And again, that's Ian Williams have improved, the contractor, but also us as the people that let the properties in and allocate the properties, there's been improvements there. So perhaps just pause on voids, Councillor Austin wanted to raise that, but clearly it wasn't good enough, but we have put improvements in place and we're starting to see some improvements.
Okay, comments, Jane?
Just wondering, do you have a benchmark sort of UK-wide as to what other councils who have this housing stock, what their performance is?
We do. I don't know if Annalisa can remember off the top of her head, but I think that this round of 30 days is not unusual. I think that's what that you would probably look to aim for, because the other complicated thing is we don't directly allocate properties. There's choice-based lettings. People got to have time to bid for the properties, then view the properties, and then they got that, because they got that choice. This can be delays there. So the whole process is a delay. So 30 days. I mean, we could clarify that, but I think 30 days is probably about average.
I suppose the question is the target appropriate?
Exactly.
Yeah, as a former letting agent for commercial property, it just does feel tight to me, that number. So.
I think we did do a process mapping to get to that target, what we should do, and it's the average. And I think and so there should be some, I think what we're relying on, because we realise we're going to go over the 25 days for some voids, but there are others we're hoping to make good to bring that average down by turning it around a lot quicker. And I think that's what we've probably got to do, a little bit more research to actually see if we, as you're saying, whether we can meet that 25. But I don't think we should just put it up to 30 because we're not reaching it. But I think we should try, and what we're trying to do is try and actually look at the process, and is there a real, what is the real realistic target, and but have the data to back it up for you to approve.
Jane, sorry, Jane, did you want to come back? Sorry, Annalise, I can't keep an eye on everybody.
That's okay. I just wanted to make a comment. So previously when we've reported, we've also, looking at that figure, it could be that we change the performance to say that 80% of empty properties are let within 25 days. And then that gives you that bit of flexibility. But I think it's also important to actually think about, well, what is the outcome of this? What are we trying to deliver? We want to maximise the use of our properties, we want to maximise our income, but we also want to make sure that people are moving into a property that is in a good state of repair, and they start their relationship with us on a positive note. We could bring the time right down by just doing an electric check and sending people in, and that's not what we want to do. So I think there's a real balance. I think financially, we keep an eye by looking at the void rent loss and as a percentage of the total income. This is one indicator, but for me, a better indicator is actually the tenant satisfaction once they've moved into that property.
Jane?
Yeah, thank you. I agree. And just coming back on that, I think another measure is how long the tenant stays. I mean, that you want to reduce the total number of voids. You need less turnover, don't you? They need to be happy in the place that they are. So anyway, yeah, I look forward to hearing more information about that. Thank you.
Before I bring Zoe in, I think a question I asked earlier was how many voids are there? Because again, we look at percentages here, and it would be interesting to know what the actual numbers are. It's probably about 40 out of our stock of nearly 5,000 homes. So I think that's about right, isn't it? So it's less than 1% is a void. Again, I don't know whether that's goodness or badness. I don't know whether 1% approximately is right or right. It feels not bad to me, actually. And I think, again, it might be interesting to have the numbers of houses that we're talking about as well as the percentages here. Zoe, sorry.
It seems to me in this corporate report, there's a lot of targets which are kind of like that, and that no one knows where they come from. You know, like you were saying, you know, they were put in place 5 years ago, no one understands why it's 5.62. And then you're saying it's an average when I don't think it's an average. You're saying it might be 80%, could be mode, median. And it seems to maybe we should get together a working group where we have fair targets that everyone agrees with, because for the corporate performance report to be meaningful, the targets need to be meaningful, because otherwise this RAG colour coding is not really meaningful. If it's based on, you know, Bayesian, you know, if the pretext, the target isn't benchmarked against other councils or the national average, then what does it actually mean? And so for us to add value, maybe we should actually do a deep dive, not too deep, but a deep dive on the targets.
I think this is work in progress. This is only the second time I think it's been presented. Jenny, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, as I said earlier, we're really keen to work with the committee on the KPI review, and my recommendation would possibly be for us to go away and do some work on this with the individual teams, come back with suggestions of what KPIs we should have in the report and what the targets would be, why they would be, you know, what we're choosing to set them as.
Might be an idea to have an informal offline meeting where we could discuss this rather than do it in full open session. I think that might be an idea. Annalise?
I'd just like to give assurance that we didn't do this when picking targets. There's a long process every year where we review them. Teams are involved. We look at benchmarking. We look at good practice. For the contractors, we look at what's the targets in there. I mean, I'm only speaking on the housing side of things, but with any statistic, you can present it in a different way, and quite often it is that context and the narrative behind the number that actually gives you the information you need, rather than just a bold figure.
George?
Thank you. So going on from that, Annalise, so from, if we look at D3, are we going to move to D3? Are we finished? Are you going to end up with voids?
Introduction to D3 then.
Okay, fine.
Is that okay? So if we've finished with voids, I was then going to just do a small. So I was going to cover then D3 to D6, which is the measurement of the repairs contract. As I said, this is mostly Ian Williams, and it's around 1,000 repairs a month. So again, their performance has not been good, as can be seen in the report. But we have been working with Ian Williams. They've had an improvement plan, and we have actually sharpened how we contract manage. So if I could go to D4 on page 43 first. So what we focused with Ian Williams is actually clearing their backlog. So they had a huge backlog of work, which again, it was just this huge amount of numbers. So you couldn't really actually see what's going on. So they had an improvement plan. So we had 26% for Q3. In January, for the repairs, for a snapshot at the end of the month, they had 15% of their jobs were over 28 days, and 17% in February. So there's a trend that they've come down as a slight increase in February. So what I'm trying to say, there is some green shoots of improvement with Ian Williams. So if we can if we can clear the backlog of jobs, I think the other performance indicators will improve. So the other positive performance indicator is repairs completed correct first time. So again, you can see that we have met the target, and this is the tenant's view. So this is from a tenant survey. And again, this is really important, I think, for Ian Williams, because it's efficient if they can get the repair done in one visit. But it's important for us as a council that when people get their repairs completed first time, their satisfaction rate is so much higher. So we're looking about 90% satisfaction rated there, which I know is a bit common sense, but I think I do like highlighting that point. And so therefore, if we can get more things done quicker in a timely manner and get them corrected first time, our satisfaction levels, which is D5, will increase. Because as you can see there, we're way behind that target there. But let's go back to the targets. We've got this target of 90%, which is probably really hard to deliver, but I'm not sure unrealistic, because if we can get the people we do the jobs right time are scoring us at 90% satisfaction. So that's where the link. So until we can while we sort out D4 and D6, we will then achieve D5, which I think is ultimately what we want, is tenant satisfaction with the repairs. Chair, I hope I'll take questions.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. I think I was very critical prior to the meeting in terms of these performance figures, and just it's same old as, again, for a very long time. We've seen a poor performance quarter after quarter after quarter with an assurance that action is being taken. It does seem that the Q4 is going to see an improving picture at last, and I welcome that. But of course, we still need to see that. The concern I had also was on D3 on page 42. My concern there was that a year ago, the target was 7 and we were getting about 11. So we were 4 days over the target. The target gets increased to 15 and lo and behold, we're still missing it by 4 days, but not 4 days on the 7. We're missing it by 4 days on the 15. So, the resetting the target to something achievable seems to have backfired rather, and it's just as bad as it was relative to the target. And so I do hope that we can see an improving position in Q4. But does anybody else want to make a comment before we move back to Hugh for a comment? Michael.
It's good to hear that things are moving in the right direction. I think that's down to officers' hard work. They should be commended for the action plan. And actually, I've seen firsthand how hard officers are pushing Ian Williams. You've obviously had lots of conversations with Ian Williams, but what do they say to you in terms of why they can't meet the targets?
I mean, I think the first thing is their senior management have acknowledged that they have delivered a poor service at Waverley. And what I think the core reason is they've not had stable management, and they seem to be a sort of a thing across their organisation. They're just constantly moving their managers around to fill in gaps across their different procurements. If they're mobilising a news contract, where they put all the best people on that, and then the other contracts suffer. They now say that they are adequately resourced. They've given a commitment that they're going to have consistent management, and they can't help if people leave, but because they get other jobs within other organisations. But they have actually moved people themselves. That's the annoying thing. And so I think that's the commitment they've given. They're going to have a consistent management, and I think if we get that consistency, they will deliver. They will deliver these improvements. I think we're going to talk about it a little bit later. The inspection process, I think that's shocked them a bit, and they realise that they've got to make sure that their clients have a good chance of getting a high grade from the regulator. So I think those combination of those things are. We and especially myself are constantly talking to them, just making sure we're talking to them, making sure they keep on track with us. I think that's the other important thing, because I think to some extent they probably the clients that shout the loudest is the ones that they respond to.
Okay, Jane.
Thank you. Forgive me if all the other committee members already know this, but this contract's been in place since 2022. How long is it ongoing for? Is Ian Williams like a national provider? do they provide, can we have some insight, not necessarily at this meeting, about local government reorganisation? What are there any alignments with local councils, etc., with housing stock? I'd love to know more about all of that. Thank you.
So we sort of move that on to item 8. I talk about that. I don't know, should we go on to item 8?
The new contract is up for renewal, so it's a 5-year contract through to 2027, and that's covered in the next agenda item. So look, sorry, George, you've got a comment, a further comment?
Yeah, so I was going to speak about D3, of course, right? So moving and they were talking about moving, having realistic targets, and obviously we moved the target, and then unfortunately this is what's happened, and so that is a real risk with that. But Hugh, what I am pleased to hear, and after talking about this, I've only been in the council for 2 years. And as you can see, the figures have not been where we wanted them to be, and it all comes down to tenant satisfaction, and that kind of thing. And that's it. You can't put the cart before the horse. So, what I hear about what you've said is holding Ian Williams to account. I know we've got a responsive repairs options report we're going to discuss in a second, where we're looking at other options, but we can't just take our eye off the ball until 2027. With that thing, you need to keep that pressure up in 25 and 26, and I know you will. And I think, what I'm hearing from you and Annalise is that, you realise the seriousness of this, and I think from all quarters. So that's what I'm really here. And that's why I brought it up in the beginning about, have you got the resources and the money to be able to do the things you want to do? Because when I see sitting there, when I see this is the 1.4 million or nearly 3 million pound of money you've got to spend. Please, try your best to spend it, and it should make a difference on this, right? So I think that's what I'd like to see. But well done, and I look forward to next couple of months and see how we get on. Yeah, it'd be great.
Hugh, comment?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, I think we can move straight to item 8.
Okay,
just
fine.
as you say, that's smooth.
Yeah, that's right. Well, let's move on. Before we do that, can we just note, this is a point where I think we should just note the Q3 KPIs. We note with some satisfaction the latest housing areas where Q4 looks to be an improving position, and we look forward to progress on that. We made notes concerning other KPIs, particularly in relation to D8, 9 and 10. And we would like to see in the future the comments coming back on that. And I think also we might note the suggestions that we made on staff turnover and staff sickness reporting. I think that would be helpful if we could say that. So that sort of sums our thoughts. And we're saying we're noting, but we're obviously noting with a few other points as well. Is that okay for the committee if we just put it in that way? We all agreed? Okay, thank you very much indeed. So the reason I then wanted us to discuss this at this point was then so that we can move seamlessly on to agenda item 8 and agenda item 9, which is also on the housing area. So Hugh, would you like to introduce agenda item 8 on the commencement of the responsive repairs options appraisal? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as I mentioned, when we're looking at performance, the main contractor we had was Ian Williams. This delivery model was scrutinised before we went to tender, and the contract was awarded to Ian Williams in 2022. It's a 5-year contract, as the Chair said, and it comes to the end in 2027. Because of the procurement rules and because of our governance, if we went for a decision to re-tender the contract, because Ian Williams, there is in the contract we can extend it up to 5 years. If we were chose the option perhaps of retendering the contract, that would actually, that's why we need to start now. So we're not actually having this options appraisal necessarily because Ian Williams' performance is poor, but it's actually what are the options for in relation post 2027 or April 27. The contract is a huge contract. We're spending £5 million a year on the repairs, so it's a £25 million contract. We've got to get it, as you say, as we clearly say, we've got to get it right. It's around health and safety. It's around the maintenance of our homes, and more important, and so most importantly, it's tenant satisfaction. If you can get your repair service right, you know, the tenants are satisfied. So what we're doing is we've employed or procured a consultant to help with the process, and in this report sort of outline what the process will be using this consultant, and coming and through a 3-month period, then identifying the options, and for then officers to make recommendations to the executive. I think it's important that Overview Committee are involved in that process, and so as they were in the previous procurement. As I say, it's a huge procurement, or we may not even go for procurement. They ask all these other different options, and the council mentioned competition. So I remember when we were looking at this contract, should we have 2 contractors, and it was decided not to, and it's not to go into that now. But those are the things we need to revisit and try and ensure we get this contract right, because it's so important for our tenants. And I think, as I say, we need to, going forward, report back to the committee how this has gone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I rather misunderstood this report until I discussed it with you. This is nothing to do with the concerns that we had with the Q3 performance report, which is ongoing, and where are we going and how we're improving it. This is, what do we do? Are we going to renew the contract, or are we going to put it out to tender? What are we going to do? There's an external set of consultants coming in to advise on what the best course of action will be, because clearly we would need to start the retendering process at least a year out, if not 18 months out or whatever, to get the thing done. So I think that this is a step in the right direction. And this is an opportunity perhaps to look and see what we could do. Maybe we could bring it in-house. I don't know. I mean, there are many options which could be looked at. And this is important because we need to understand what we could do. So I would want to note the fact that this is a perfectly sensible thing to be doing, and we'd be very anxious to receive the result of it coming back, so that we can input into that process. But Jane, did you want to say something?
Thanks. I mean, I know things are changing quickly in terms of whether Waverley will even exist soon, and what is not within the scope, it looks like, of this report. Apologies, I am reading it slightly late, didn't quite notice this agenda item, but I have now read it properly. And there's nothing on LGR sort of risk analysis options into, we should be thinking about how we're going to be interacting with future councils, or what's going to happen with, the housing stock of other councils, etc. What surely efficiencies and all of that, that's how we may make those efficiencies going forward for residents. So it's just a question as to whether that will be dealt with, and what's the plan?
Annalise?
Have you got a crystal ball? I think would be the question. Absolutely. So with collaboration, we're already looking across the housing services about where we can align things. We're sharing good practice. We're giving peer supports. We're looking at when we're doing policy development, strategy development, we're sharing that information. So we're aligning as much as we can. When it comes to repairs is an issue for both councils, and both councils are doing this kind of review as to what's the future look like, what's going to be best moving forward. I think the timing is going to be very interesting. Even if we go full steam ahead with devolution and we end up with a new organisation, we're going to have a new organisation that has other organisations that have still got contracts that need to run. So for the housing team, the message to my team and to the tenants is, We are your housing provider. We have strategies, business plan. We've got an improvement plan. We are going to continue to deliver on those. I'm not waiting to see what's going to happen in the future. We've got a clear plan. We know our responsibilities. We know we've got ambition to improve, and we're going to continue to do that. And then as things come to fruition and as more information comes out, we will then be able to consider our options. But if we end up in a position in 2 years where we do have a new responsive repairs contractor, we will have that contract and the new organisation will inherit that contract. So I hope that's as much clarity as I can give. I hope that helps.
Jane, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I mean, it would be good as soon as it's possible to know, to have an indication of what our nearby council's position is, I think, just for our information as a committee, because that will colour the decisions and the recommendations that we make going forwards. That's my request.
I think that's probably reasonable, although I accept, I mean, the assumption is, I guess, that Guildford and Waverley may well be together in some future council, but there will be other councils as well. But it's a bit, as you say, Crystal Star, yeah, it is a bit gazing to the future. We don't really know. But I think we should certainly make a note of the fact that LGR is on the horizon and that can't be ignored.
I didn't mean to say that I was ignoring it. I mean to say that I'm continuing to drive forward, and absolutely we will make those considerations as we come along. But I think the best thing we can do is to put Waverley in the best place it can be for whoever it joins with.
Well, our prime
hopefully the
responsibility
lead.
is towards our 5,000 residents or 5,000 homes and 500 leaseholders. I mean, irrespective of what happens in LGR, that's our responsibility. And I think we need to understand that. But yes, we can't ignore it. Other members, George, did you want to say Michael first? Michael, then George.
Just briefly, I absolutely agree with Annalisa. You know, we need to focus on this recovery plan alongside this, and then hear what the consultant says, and then we can keep discussing it, and then we'll get to a stage, and then if at some stage when the shadow authority is in place, and some of those decisions are given to them, you know, I don't know, something will happen at that stage, I imagine. But in the meantime, we need to be discussing this as if it might never happen. It might not happen. We need to make sure we've got these things in place for 27, but also make sure that we've got our performance really nailed on for to that time. So yeah, absolutely. I don't think LGR should be really bothering us for this issue, and we'll know as we know, right?
Thank you. Michael?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's very prudent that this has come forward and that we're looking at it's a very early stage. And I thought the scope pretty much covered most areas that I'd be looking at. There's probably, I ideally would like to extend the scope ever so slightly if you're open to it. The first is I've heard in previous council meetings, mainly from councillors, that well, there's not many suppliers out there that we can use as a single supplier option. I think I'd probably want, you know, this report to look at what options there are in the industry, you know, in terms of suppliers. And then the second one is advice on looking at an alternative in terms of maybe a multi-supplier or panel supplier model as well, and how that would operate, how we could operate something like that. Obviously, the pros and cons of that as well.
Any other comments before I go back to Annalise or Hugh? Okay, Annalise, do you want to just sum up, or Hugh?
So we take on the points that the councillor Higgins has made, and we can make sure that's included in the scope. I think I really want to go back to Councillor Murray's point, and just to reconfirm, there is 2 projects. We've got to make sure Ian Williams perform up to 2027, and that's what we're focused. But we also need to make sure whatever the decision is, we make it work after 27. We get the best decision we can for that. So I just want to reassure the committee of that, and I think we just need, apart from other members, but this committee's particular support in achieving scrutinisers in those 2 issues to ensure that we keep to those targets. Thank you.
I think the observation I would make is that if I were the performance contractor in the last 2 years, I'd be wanting to do a really good job. And of course, what we must consider in the award for the future is not what happened in the last 2 years, but over the 5 years as a whole of a contract. So, so I think we're asked to note this, and we note the report, and we would ask you to take note of the comments that we've made, particularly in relation to a local government reorganisation, a full options analysis as to what we might or might not do, and looking at what other councils nearby are doing as well. I think that would be the note that we would make. Are people happy with that as an observation? Okay, I think we're all agreed on that. Okay, thank you. If we move then to item 9, Hugh, would you like to introduce this?
Yes, so I think in this report, we're formally informing the committee of the regulatory judgment by the regulator of social housing after their inspection of our services. As the report mentions, we got a grading of C2, which identifies some improvement is needed, basically, that we weren't meeting the new consumer standards, i.e. the regulatory code, and they clearly identified the issues that we need to improve. In the report, though, I first highlight the in the judgment where the regulator recognises some of the good work that the council does in terms of housing. I think I particularly would like to highlight the one about performance reporting to senior officers, councillors and tenants has recently improved. And I think just want to thank this committee in helping us achieve that improvement. And there's something we've got to continue to do, have this relationship with this committee. But there's a number of other things that you'll be able to read in the report that it does recognise. But then it does highlight our weaknesses and where we need to identify the weaknesses and where we need to improve, which is a range of things. And particularly the repair service that we need to, how we need to improve that particularly. They gave us a couple of meetings where they gave us verbal feedback. And one of the things that sticks in my mind is they really did focus on the repairs because of it's maintaining our homes, it's tenant satisfaction, it's keeping them safe. And I just feel if we had that excellent repair service, we would really be perhaps near that C1 grading, which we want. But in any case, there are many further actions. So what we have done is bringing those all into one single improvement plan. Because one of the other things that the regulator noticed that we had many improvement plans, and it was about bringing back one, which when we can then be accountable to this committee and to the Landlord Services Board and to senior management. That is being, we're consulting with the Landlord Services Board on that report on that improvement plan, and then we're going to come back onto the chair's request that we present that improvement plan to you, which will be clear objectives to actually meet in terms of us meeting the C1 grading. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments, George?
Thank you. So I was obviously involved in the C3 thing from the very for the housing ombudsman thing from the very beginning. When I read it, I was very pleased with it that you got C2. What was more improving that there wasn't anything in there which you weren't aware of. Right? They weren't. We discussed it beforehand with them when they came to have a chat, and we talked about it. And that was the main thing. I think you knew where you needed to improve, and where still to improve. So there wasn't any big surprises in there. And the C2 is fine. The first ever one. You've got some improvement to do, but you knew where the improvements were needed, and you'd identified them before the report. So I think from that point of view, it was a good start. Thank you very much.
Other comments? Okay, just from the chair, could I just congratulate the service on getting a C2. It's the first time this regulation has been investigated. Wrong word. Adjudicated. What's the word? Inspected is the word I'm looking for. And the range is C1, 2, 3, and 4. 3 and 4 would have been terrible. C1 would be wonderful if we could make it, but I imagine that we would not achieve C1 with the difficulties we're having with voids and emergency repairs and so on and so forth. So that's the area for improvement particularly. It's a very straightforward recommendation from that we should note the regulatory judgment issued by the regulator of social housing. We're happy to do, and to agree that the Overview and Scrutiny Resources Committee, this committee, continues to monitor the improvement plan. So I look forward to the improvement plan coming to the committee and to our continued monitoring of it. Is that okay as a recommendation from the committee? So we're happy with the recommendations that are made and look forward to seeing more at the next meeting and as we go forward. Agreed. We all agree? Okay, and so thank you, Hugh, very much indeed. There's a lot of work to do, but you know, there are some hopeful signs in what you're doing, so that's much to be commended. Okay, George, sorry, Andy.
I should have asked earlier. I'd just be interested to know how often this inspection takes place.
So it's the new regulations came in on the 1st of April, and the expectation is that every social landlord will be inspected on a 4-year rolling programme. Waverley were delighted to be in the second cohort of inspections. So we were not quite at the pilot stage. So just to let you know that since that we've started with the regulator, there's been 20 inspections that the regulator has completed. And they've also been working with 16 other local authorities. This is just local authority information, not registered providers. 16 local authorities have approached the regulator for support and ongoing engagement. So altogether, out of the 36 local authorities that the regulator is working with, 49% of them have got a C2 or a C1 rating. No, I've obviously done my maths wrong. Because 49 and 59 does not add up to 100, and I know you're gonna know that for me. So let's go back to the numbers. So there's been 20 inspections for local authorities, of which 3 have got a C1, 11 have got a C2, and the C2 is compliant. In that inspection, 5 have got a C3 and 1's got a C4. But of the people who've done the self-referral and gone for regulatory engagement, nobody's got a C1 or C2. 4 local authorities have got a C3 and 1's got a C4. So there's that. So we're best placed, and I think Hugh's not very good at. No, you're very good. But actually, I would have started the conversation by saying, as the councillor said, the regulator didn't find anything we hadn't already told them about. We'd done our assessment. We were comfortable with what the regulatory consumer standards are. We knew where we were, and we'd already got plans in place to address the weaknesses that we'd identified. And I want to thank you all, because the inspection team were very happy with the observations and the meetings they'd had with people, and they recognise that we've got that scrutiny. So thank you.
Thank you, Annalise, very much, and thank you to you and to your team and to Hugh, to all the team for what they've done. That's a good performance, getting a C2, and we can clearly see ways in which we can get to a C1. We know what we have to do, and I look forward to when we in fact do get a C1. Maybe just before we, well, I suppose if it's 4 years, that's it. We won't get another one. But at least I think we're well on track. So well done. Thank you. Let us move on then, ladies and gentlemen, if we may, to item 11, which is the work programme. This is really just trying to work out what we look at in the future. In terms of the likely items coming forward to our next meeting in June, I would expect to see two housing items like the ones we've just had, which you see on page 104. And I think we would regularly expect to see a housing, particularly on the improvement plan and on the complaints. So we would expect to see that coming through. Maybe on the complaints, it would be just folded into the Q4 performance report. But if you leave that with me, then I think we can develop it in that way. Is that okay on that one, those two? Okay. And then going forward, on page 105, we do need to see, I think, the transformation and collaboration update, costs and savings. Perry Ashton is a new member of staff, so it'll be interesting to bring him into the meeting next time round. I think we do need to, the safeguarding approach, I think, has gone to ONS services, so that's not for us to worry about. We will have a Q4 corporate performance report as opposed to the Q3 that we've seen today. We will continue to see a property investment report. And then item 5 on page 105 is the Oxford Ridge project. You'll recall this was a deep retrofitting scheme for 7 houses, around about £250,000 each, to get to an A rating. I'm very anxious that we should get that's now complete, and I want to understand how we arrived at the level of expenditure we did, which is very high, and what we're getting from it and where we're going in the future. You'll note that in the budget there was an application to government for 339 houses to be improved to a level C, and £17,000, or that £17,000 to £18,000 per house was being spent to get the houses up to a level C. This was getting houses up to level A, which is a different scene altogether. And I want to understand the success of that project or otherwise, and the replicatability, that horrible word, going forward as to whether we can do that. Michael?
Just on that point, I think, yeah, it's worth looking at. It would be helpful to actually see some of these properties, and I don't know if you're open to maybe a site visit to.
Yeah, I think a site visit will be very sensible. Of course, that might be difficult because presumably the homes are occupied now. We wouldn't appear inside, but it might, if not a site visit, then some photographs to show before and after with a very detailed observation. George?
Yeah, I went to visit one. Well, a few of them, which were done with the executive when I was on the executive, and they were very, very good. Whether they were £250,000 good, I don't know, but they were very, very good. I mean, you would move in tomorrow and you'd be super happy to live there. They were efficient, they were modern, they were clean, they were, inside and out. They were absolutely like brand new houses. So, from that perspective, value for money, 250,000, I don't know, but certainly from a tenant's perspective, you're going to be, anyone who lives in there is going to be very lucky.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But I think the value, I mean, we're charged with looking at value for money, and that's what I want to see. Yeah, but 7 houses at that sort of level, how many others could we have done to get to a level C? And where we right to do it, and what are other authorities doing? How are they doing versus that? I mean, I think there are a number of things that we want to understand. Going over the page, here's where we have a slight difficulty. Cranley Skate Park, we look at that. Well, it looks as that's something which perhaps should come to this committee. That may include a property acquisition, for instance. So I think that might be something which we bring in. Waverley Training Services we've mentioned. So I think that's what the next meeting will consist of. Not all of those will make it, because whatever you put on for the future, 1 or 2 are never going to be ready, and you always take a few out. But that will be the guts of the next meeting. Are there any other items that occur to people that they think ought to be coming to the next meeting?
Only what we've recommended today.
Yeah, apart from that. Yeah. Okay, and then just on the last task and finish groups, the workforce profile, this is page 107, workforce profile review working group. I think this is something which we could probably wind up. We can't keep things going forever. Some work was done. Zoe, you led some work in terms of improving the level of reporting for workforce, and that was done. Do you want to just comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, we did some fantastic work with Candice and a couple of other colleagues, Richard, and they were so responsive. I mean, we really didn't need more than 2 or 3 meetings, so we no longer need to meet on that front, and we see the fruits of that labour in our reports today.
So I think we should wind that workforce working group up. That's fine, thank you. And then the Housing Scrutiny Review Group, this is something which I think, Andrew, you need to report to the next meeting on what's happening on that and whether we should continue it and how it should continue. So I think that's it for that. Any other points that people want to make in terms of that, or are you happy to leave that in the hands of me? Okay. Chris, yes.
Okay, so just a couple of bits from me. Thank you, Chair. I mentioned at the last committee that we were looking to do a refresh of the work programme, and that's still very much on the horizon. What we're going to be doing first is we're going to be running a workshop to effectively plan for our annual scrutiny review, which hasn't been done for a couple of years, but we're very keen now that we've got a fully staffed team that we are actually able to do that. And so I think once we've had the opportunity to do so, that's when it'll be a great chance to actually start planning agendas over a longer period of time, because I feel that everything is perhaps very ad hoc at the moment. And whilst it's good to be responsive, I think it's also very good to be proactive. So I think as part of the workload, work programming session, what we'll be doing is inviting members in to effectively say, okay, well, what are the issues that are pertinent to you, and what kind of scoping would you like to give them? We'll be doing the same with services ONS as well. And I just wanted to reassure members that, as I say, as part of our continued improvement, we are really trying to raise the profile of scrutiny. And yeah, so I will, as I say, I'll be in touch about a session about the annual report. You'll be receiving invites to that fairly soon, along with a survey as well, so that we can gather your views if you're able to make the programming session. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments? That seems like a very sensible thing to be doing. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Any other points that anybody wants to make on future programme, on workload? Okay, thank you. Right, at that point, I'm going to close the meeting from a public point of view. I need to read that pursuant to Procedure Rule 20 and in accordance with Section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the committee agrees, 1, that the public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following matter on the grounds it's likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted, or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during the item, there will be disclosure to them of exempt information as defined by Section 1001 of the Act, of the description specified in paragraph 10 of the revised Part 1 of Schedule 12A, the Local Government Act of 1972, and that 2, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Are we all happy with that recommendation?